following is a presentation of Learfield IMG College. From the Georgia Southern Sports Network, powered by Learfield IMG College.
Wings up, Eagle Nation! Touchdown, Georgia Southern!
This is Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Eagle athletics.
Taking a look through all the other action in Georgia Southern athletics this past week. A lot of road action. A lot of teams hitting the old I-16 out of town.
Getting on the steel horse and taking us to parts north, south, west, wherever. Can't really go too much farther east.
Now let's return to the Learfield IMG College studios. Here are your hosts, Colin Lacy and Danny Reed.
That's a fact, Jack.
Welcome into another edition of Inside Eagle Nation, episode number 144. I saw it pop up on my Facebook memories. It was 3 years ago, just a couple of days, I think it was Saturday, 3 years ago that we had started Inside Eagle Nation. You want to talk about a trip to get somewhere? That was a trip to get here, but 144 strong now of Inside Eagle Nation.
And we had the little blurb that went out saying, coming now.
Yeah.
This Inside Eagle Nation podcast deal, and then a couple days later,
going to end up being.
We had the first episode. I want to say Terry was on with us. It might have been Frank.
Yeah, I think it was Terry, then Frank.
And then we did one where Terry came back on. I think we had Tim Durden on because that was one of the ones where we talked about somebody.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. So far,
it was Pat. It was the Pat Parr episode.
That's right.
Papa Bear.
But 144 strong. This is going to be a busy one this week on Inside Eagle Nation. One, we have moved to our new location that you can see. It's not all pretty and decorated yet, but we will get there in the next couple of days. But next week, it'll look a little different, but you got to stay tuned.
This is the first stage in the movement. See, we went from, okay, where have we gone?
Oh,
we've gone from recorded to our studio,
correct,
to J.I. Clemens,
correct,
to Paulson,
right,
to here.
We had a Zoom mixed in there at some point.
Yeah, we had. Yeah, that's how we are.
But now we are here in the basement of Hanner, and this is going to be, at least for the foreseeable future, our permanent home.
For the foreseeable future, our permanent home.
Yeah. I realize that doesn't make any sense.
That's how it works here.
But it makes sense in my head.
But we're on 144. We're also 12 days from kickoff.
We are. That's what my countdown clock told me this morning.
Well, yours should be somewhere, 11 and so many hours. And
yeah, it's got the hours. I don't want to get into that right now. I know when I walked in, I looked at the days and it said 12. I said, ooh, here we go. But somebody that can help you see that kickoff in 12 days, we're going to visit with, to start with, and Walker Sandlin from the Georgia Southern Ticket Office. Walker, appreciate you joining us.
Appreciate it, guys. Looking forward to a great year. Like you said, 12 days away. It's fastly approaching.
We were talking before we got on here about how whenever you're talking to people about getting on with Georgia Southern, becoming season ticket holders, you tell them, hey, it's so many days away, and you started at 50, and you had a countdown in your office, and now you're down to 12.
Yeah, so I started out with 50 days just to let people know, hey, 50 days away. That was in July. So, college football was getting closer, but, media days hasn't happened. Once media days happened, that, countdown got, a little closer and closer, and then now it's August. So we're 12 days away, and it's fastly coming. And I tell people every day it's going to be here before we know it, and now it's almost here.
Are you tearing days off? Are you putting X's through days? How did you do the countdown?
So we got a big board in our office, so it's just a big number. It's big 1, 2, and it's start, days to kick off, and every morning that's the first thing I do is change that. So tomorrow, first thing I did, 8:30, 11 days to kick off, and now just remind myself and others, hey, we're 11 days to kick off now.
Before we get too deep into it, let's kind of talk about how people get in touch with you. I know you're relatively new to Georgia Southern Athletics. I think you said you started back in March. But how can people get in touch with you and be a part of what Georgia Southern is going for now?
Absolutely. So we got a website, gseagles.com/tickets. On that, you get all of our information about tickets. My name's on there. As my other bosses, Nathan Castillo, director of ticket ops, and then Jack Giscaria, he's our assistant, and then Trevor Johnson, he's a GM sales. So we are the Power Four that had to control the ticket office and fills those seats, not just for football, but all sport events here at Georgia Southern.
I know you've talked about it at different occasions, different events, but Georgia Southern Ticket Office has really done big things. We talked about what the Athletic Foundation has done this past year, but it's been a really good year for the ticket office as well.
Absolutely. The Athletic Foundation and us work in the same office, so we go, we work together well. So we work with them. So season ticket holders in football, actually, some of our areas around the stadium joined the Irk Russell Fund. That supports our student athletes. So I always let people know in the fund that, how much money they give is going towards student athletes. And you get to come out and support them with 6 great home games, what I say. 6 home games that I think 2 top 25 teams coming in here. Athens, Georgia currently cannot have anything to say about that because they don't have top 25 teams coming to visit them.
Anytime we can hold something over Georgia's head, you got to take advantage.
Currently, right now, as of today's date, they don't have any top 25 teams visiting them this fall. So
I'm sure Kirby likes it that way.
It can change. So that's what we got going on. But like I said, we're working. We got ticket booklets been sent out. Those people should be receiving them here pretty soon. So if you're listening and if you want to call in tomorrow about ticket booklets, they're coming. UPS should be coming by today when we're leaving office and picking those up, and we're shipping them. So.
Talk about the numbers that you guys have been able to hit this year. It's been, again, a really good year for the ticket office and being able to sell the season tickets, but also that means more support for the Georgia Southern Eagle Nation.
Absolutely. As of right now, I believe we're close to setting records from previous years. I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I know we're close. So these next couple of days, we're pushing hard for those season tickets. If you checked our social media pages, you saw the videos, and all, Twitter and Facebook. So we're pushing those because we're very close to breaking records, if not here breaking them pretty soon. So keep supporting, and like I said, keep buying. So.
That's got to be amazing. For the last year and a half, all we've heard about is COVID and how we've had to deal with COVID, how we've had to adapt with COVID. To set fundraising records in the middle of a pandemic, to have maybe the most season ticket holders we've ever had still at the tail end of that pandemic, that has to give you guys a lot of pride.
It gives us a lot of hope, and you see the support, and that's our job. Our job isn't to coach and teach players. My job is to fill seats for all of our sport and athletics. So each and every day I go into office with that mentality is just, pack as many seats and create as many experiences for families and people coming to Paulston or J.I. Clemens or Hanna or any other sporting event here at Georgia Southern. It's just going to make an experience for everyone that makes it out. So that's our goal here in the ticket office as well.
Now, you guys don't just handle football. It's everything across Georgia Southern Athletics. And this year, a little bit of a change of what sports are ticketed events. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got football, obviously, volleyball going to be starting up this weekend, men's and women's basketball coming up before too long, and then baseball and softball are all ticketed events. Outside of that, you've got everything else is free range. Everybody else can come in and support how they want.
Yep, soccer's getting kicked off. So those games, just look them up. Go to the stadium. There can be no admission. So they're free. Tennis as well. Any other sport here, Georgia Southern, that you don't see that's ticketed, stop by and watch. They definitely will appreciate support as well.
And within the last few weeks, the Pledge Per Win campaign has come out where Eagle Nation can say every time Eagles win a football game, this is how much we're going to give. And being at the luncheon earlier today where Coach Lunsford spoke at the Bullitt County Alumni Luncheon, David Cutler mentioned we're somewhere around $2,000 that is going to be pledged per Georgia Southern win, which if things go right, that means we're going to have about $30,000 with a 15-0 record. But what's been your experience trying to share that with people?
Yeah, just letting people know, just support the coaches as well. They're putting in some hours each and every day. So just kind of giving them a mark of just seeing that of, each and every win. This will be back donated to the coaches fund, and that's pushing them as well, not just for the money, but it's just a good overall to support the coaches, not just the regular coaches, but the GAs, the volunteer people. It supports everyone within the football staff, so it's just all the fundraiser supports everyone.
Got a question on Facebook Live. David Cutler, as you mentioned, asking, hey, Tex, how many tickets have you sold today?
Okay, so, we sold a couple of singles this morning. I sold 3 season today.
I thought you were going to say as you walked in the door.
Yeah.
Close some deals, end of the day.
Absolutely, that's what it is. Got some people. We're hopefully going to write some checks to our office tomorrow. So I got those seats saved for them just for tonight. Let them know, hey, you're going to contact me tomorrow. So we got more coming tomorrow, David. I say every number I sell, I go to his office and say, hey, 3 more on the board, just to let them know.
Take us through that process and for people that haven't done it before, haven't bought season tickets for Georgia Southern, you can have your seats for as long as you want to have your seats. You can pick them out individually. Take us through that process of what it looks like for somebody coming on new.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have good rates for everyone. We have the Grass Hill seats that start at $80. So those are not physical seats, but you're more than welcome to bring a blanket, bring your family, come out, sit on that Grass Hill, which is not a bad area, I've heard. It's not a bad view as well. I've sat there and watched some of practice, and it's not a bad view. So those start at $80 as a family plan. And then, season ticket ranges from $220 to the club to $135, on the home side, and then home $135 on the away side as well. So some of those do require donation. Like I said, that donation is the Irk Russell Fund, so that money is getting supporting student athletes. So I always remind people that, like I said, this donation is supporting athletes. So that's the process. So we have areas open around our stadium. So I kind of help people, first off, is where they like to sit. Some people have particular areas they like. Some people are very easy and be like, there's not a bad seat in Paulson. So find me something. And so just go from there and just select them through the process, and hopefully you got some seats they like. And if they want to come out and see us, I'll let them know they can come by the office, and I'll take them to those seats. They can sit down in them and just get a bird's eye view of like what would it be like on a game day here. So I do that with people as well. So that's kind of the process through that.
Dive a little bit into your story. You and I were talking about it before we started rolling here about how born and raised in Georgia, being able to be a Georgia boy, you knew about Georgia Southern, and that's part of what made you come back and work for Georgia Southern.
Yeah, so I'm from Noonan, Georgia, about 45 minutes south of Atlanta. So growing up, my dad was a high school football coach, so I knew a lot about high school football and also getting big in college. I grew up an Alabama fan, being from the state of Georgia. My dad went to Alabama, his sister go to Alabama, had a mom go to Auburn, and a sister go to Auburn. So we are a house divided through and through.
Now, how do y'all function during the season?
It's very interesting.
Okay.
So the kick six was an interesting part of my life.
Yeah, I could
my
see
dad
that.
just had to get in the car and drive around for a couple hours. It was something that a lot of people it's funny, but it's memorable. And then I went to Jacksonville State University, so we are in the FCS. So that's the football I watched for college. So I loved the FCS type program,
Nice. And
and I knew Georgia Southern had a good run in that. But the Sun Belt is a great conference, and I know that jump has just benefited y'all the most. So did some time with the Atlanta Falcons in sales, but then got a job opportunity down here. And I knew what I was getting myself into. I wasn't coming down to a metropolitan big city. I knew I'm coming down to a football heaven. I knew a lot about the tradition here, not just in football, but all other sports. So that led me to come down here. It was just a tradition in the athletic department, and I haven't turned back since, and I loved it ever since.
What else have you found out since you've been here?
That these fans they take Georgia Southern pretty seriously.
Yeah.
As David Cutler say, they're true blue, and I do believe that. There's been a lot of people that told stories of just the beginning days. That's been great to hear.
Yeah.
A couple of people come in and say, I put concrete in that stadium. And I always like to say, please tell me what was that like, because look at it now, and what were you doing back in the 80s, and putting concrete in, and then seeing it now. What do you think about it? And they've been a season ticket holder since the start, and just get their reaction from it. And also talking to our young alumni, just the recent college kids that come out, and they get that good rate of a young alumni rate for season tickets that we offer. After 4 years, they get a discounted rate on their season tickets, just getting back to the program pretty early. So even talking to them and saying, why did you get on board so quick? So I've loved talking to people. So that's one thing that got me into sales. So I love hearing people's stories, and they've been some amazing stories since I've been here of just y'all's fans in general.
Before we let you go, again, how can people reach out to you? How can people get in contact with not only football season tickets? I know that's a big push right now, but you could volleyball season tickets as well, and then we'll get into basketball here in the next couple of months.
We are live with said football and volleyball right now for all of our season tickets. Basketball here be getting up pretty soon, finalizing that schedule. We're getting that built. So you can reach us at 1-800-GSU-WINS. We have student workers Monday through Friday, along with myself and others. Give us a call. We can answer any of your ticket questions, take you through the process, and help you secure some tickets and get you out for great 6 home games this year, and also any other sports as well.
I know there's a lot of people over in that office that really love Georgia Southern, really love being able to help the experience of becoming a season ticket holder. Walker, appreciate you joining us tonight.
I appreciate it, guys. Appreciate what y'all do. Let me come on and talk about a little bit of ticketing. And like I said, reach us at 1-800-GSU-WINS. We'll take care of y'all.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thank y'all.
We'll transition now as we go into our next segment of this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. We catch up with Phil Steele from the Phil Steele Publications. That coming up next. Welcome back on this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation, your official podcast for Georgia Southern Athletics, and we are happy to be joined on the third consecutive year by Phil Steele. Does the Phil Steele Preview magazine for college football, does a lot on the NFL side as well. But Phil, appreciate you joining us.
Hey, a real pleasure, Colin. Always enjoy talking Georgia Southern football.
Let's go back to 2020 real quickly. What did the 2020 COVID season, in your eyes, do to the college football world?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Colin. The main thing was that it was played. I think if it hadn't been played, it would have set an ugly precedent. I like the fact that all the college football teams, even the conferences that said they were going to cancel their seasons, play in the spring, they all ended up coming back playing. We had conference champions in each of the conferences, all 10 of them in the FBS, and then a national champion was crowned at the end of the year. So thank goodness we played. I know it was an uneven season for a lot of teams, the things they had to go through, but almost every team had to go through the same thing. So I'm just very thankful that the season was played.
You talk about some of those leagues that said at the outset that they weren't going to play and then decided to later in the season. At the beginning, it kind of was a little bit of an advantage for a Sun Belt Conference teams that got a lot of national exposure on national TV. From the Sun Belt Conference perspective, what do you think that did to kind of elevate and get it out to more eyes?
Oh, it was definitely huge. And I'll be honest with you. Normally I'm watching 12 games. So I'm watching all the Sun Belt games, but it's one of 12 games that I'm watching. And then what I do during the week is I go and I watch individual games. And I watched more individual games of the Sun Belt this year because I basically could watch all 37 games that were being played each week early in the season. So I know myself learned more about the Sun Belt, and I got to think the nation learned a lot more about it. And then how about the productivity of the Sun Belt teams? I mean, a team like Coastal Carolina proving their worth, having a fantastic season like they did. Louisiana, a great season. App State, even though they slipped a little bit to 9-3, tremendous season. I love the way the Sun Belt played in the bowls. I love the way the Sun Belt played overall. It was just a great season for the Sun Belt.
We've talked about what a typical college football Saturday looks like on your side, whether you're watching 12 games and doing it at all different time slots, but how did the COVID year kind of change what you were able to do this year?
Well, the main difference is, first of all, the things that happened in COVID were the schedule changes. They affected the magazine. We had to put up the updated schedules on the website. People had to print them off, cut them out, put them in their magazine. We had people that had 500-page magazines at the end of the year, Colin. The second thing it did was, last year when I talked to first-year head coaches, generally the first-year head coaches that I talk to every year, at least they've been through a spring practice. Last year I would send them over my team pages, and they've got all the players on the team. They've got all my notes on every player, all the stats on every player. And generally what I do with the coaches, and this year I talked to 110 to 130 head coaches. So I say, okay, coach, put my team in order. Tell me a little something, the strengths and weaknesses on each of the players. Calls take about an hour and a half. With some of the first-year head coaches last year, when I sent them the sheets, they were like, Phil, you probably know the team better than me because I haven't even seen these kids in pads yet. So it was an interesting in that aspect as far as the magazine. So good that we're back to normal this year. Every coach I talked to had the benefit of spring practice already under their belt. And so good that we're going to actually have fans in the stands across the country. I think that's going to be huge this year.
Another thing that makes your job a little bit more difficult in the last year or so has been the transfer portal and having to keep up with all the transfers, who's going where, who is still at what location. And I know you've had to put a couple of asterisks and say, this is what it was as of this date. But how much more difficult does the transfer portal and especially late transfers do into what you guys do?
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about it this year, Colin, is last year with COVID, first of all, I didn't know if we were going to print a magazine. Then when I finally decided we were going to print a magazine after talking to the coaches and having them pretty much tell me, if you put the ball on the field, we're going to play, we went to the press very late last year. And so this year I determined that we weren't going to go to the press until June 15th. Now, the portal, or the time to enter the portal, closed on June 30th, so we only missed about 15 days, and we were able to capture the majority of the transfers. You take a look at a player like Luke McCaffrey, who was on the Louisville roster in the spring, and then he ended hitting the portal late May, and I thought, well, we're never going to find Luke McCaffrey, and lo and behold, Mike Bloomgren, the head coach of Rice, calls me on June 13th. Now, we're in the final 2 days of the magazine trying to get everything together, and he's like, Phil, you told me to call you if we got anybody. We got Luke McCaffrey coming in because of the fact that he had the relationship with the family at Stanford. So now we were able to plug Luke McCaffrey in as a starting quarterback at Rice, change the quarterback write-up, change the offensive write-up, change the overall forecast, and get that updated. So we were able to capture the majority of it, but it did make it difficult. I'll tell you what, though, it makes it a lot more difficult on the coaches, Colin, because they've got to almost re-recruit their entire roster every year to keep them on the team from not hitting the portal. It's really tough on the coaches.
So we dive into what the 2021 season looks like. Give us your overall kind of what it looks like from a 100,000-foot view of the Sun Belt Conference. We're going to talk a little bit more specific of the East and the West, but kind of the overall arching views of what the Sun Belt looks like in 2021.
Well, the big news is for the Sun Belt is in the front of the magazine, I rank the conferences, and generally the Sun Belt is always down there, let's face it, 8, 9, or 10. As far as the conferences go. But this year, I actually rated the Sun Belt as the seventh best conference in college football, right behind the American Conference. And it's the strength at the top. You take a look at teams like App State, Coastal Carolina, Louisiana. All three of those teams are capable of having the same type of success that the Sun Belt had last year, running the table perhaps, and being ranked. And so that's a big plus. I look at the West, my overall view, it's Louisiana and a bunch of guys. When I look at the East, I'm looking at 5 bowl-caliber teams. I mean, App State, Coastal, Georgia State, Troy, Georgia Southern, all 5 of them are bowl-caliber teams. I think the East is going to be an extremely tough division this year.
And you kind of had that in your magazine. You had Appalachian State and Coastal as number ones in the East whenever you ranked them, and then Georgia State, Troy, Georgia Southern, all as 3s. What kind of went into that? It's kind of something unique in the magazine as far as that's the way that you ranked the Sun Belt East.
Yeah, when you go back and look at it, Colin, there are generally a lot of ties in the standings. So I do probably put more ties than most folks do, but let's face it, I think there's about 40% of the teams end up being tied in the division standings on the course of a year. But for me, it was like splitting hairs trying to figure out who I would pick for that. Georgia State is a much improved team this year. They were great down the stretch. Georgia Southern is loaded, 16 returning starters, 16-3 at home the last 3 years. And they, of course, have got last year they had 4 close losses or could have had a much better record. And Troy's a team that last year was very inexperienced, got hit hard by COVID, but I think they're a very talented team, and they've proven that on the field on a weekly basis. I couldn't pick one of those teams to finish third and then one of those teams to finish fifth, so I picked them all as a tie for third. I think they're all bowl-caliber squads.
When you look at Georgia Southern specifically, you talk about the record at Paulson Stadium at home, and we've talked about it in past editions of Inside Eagle Nation. This may be the best home schedule that Georgia Southern has. You've got Louisiana, Arkansas State, Coastal Carolina, and BYU all coming to Statesboro. What does that do for a Georgia Southern team that historically has done well at home, but I know in your magazine you said it's one of those either make or break type deals?
Yeah, and that's it completely. It is a make-or-break season for Georgia Southern based on those home games because, those are the 3 top teams in the league, and if you end up losing those games, then all of a sudden the more winnable games are all on the road, making for a very tough environment. But, you go back and look at Louisiana last year. Georgia Southern probably should have beat them on the road, and they came up 2 points short. Now they get them at home, so that could be a huge feather in their cap early in the season. The Coastal Carolina game, Last year wasn't great, but the last time Coastal traveled here was an overtime game, went to 3 overtimes. Georgia Southern won. If they can get that win again, that would be huge. And, even a team like BYU at home is going to be a big game. So, and Georgia State at home is another one. So, the home games are huge. If Georgia Southern wins all their home games this year, they've got a chance of winning the Sun Belt. If they lose those home games against the top teams, then it could make for a difficult season.
When you look at the personnel for Georgia Southern, what they have this year, you mentioned 16 returning starters for this Eagles team. What is it that you see from this Georgia Southern team? Obviously having to figure out the quarterback position with Shy Words moving to Louisville, but what is it about this Georgia Southern team that you see that really jumps out to you?
I think when you look offensively, it's the backfield, and if they can get Justin Tomlin back, I know he's going to miss the first 2 games, but Justin Tomlin, I think, can be a very good quarterback in this system. Working with a guy like J.D. King, and then the addition of Amari Jones. I think Amari Jones is a guy that's just going to be a dynamic playmaker coming over from Tulane. They're going to use him as running back, receiver, probably wildcat quarterback as well. That really sets up well for the offense of Georgia Southern and makes them a lot more dynamic, having a player like him on the field. Defensively, last year they only gave up 326 yards per game. They played pretty good defense. My biggest question is who's going to replace Raymond Johnson. He was a very productive defensive end. He was a guy that had 5 sacks, 9.5 TFL last year. They also lose Rashad Bird, but I like the overall talent, and I like the additions at linebacker. Despite losing the top linebackers, they add in a Kadri Jackson and Andrew Johnson, transfers from North Carolina and Oregon, which helps out. And it's a veteran secondary. 2 NFL-caliber cornerbacks in Darryl Baker and Derek Canteen, I think, really help out a defense all the way around. So it's a very talented Georgia Southern team. Offensively, the player that I think is going to jump out at the end of the year is going to be Amari Jones.
And you talk about Amari Jones. I know he's somebody that you're extremely high on. You mentioned the transfer from Tulane. You ranked him as the 4th-team running back in the preseason poll when he hasn't taken a snap as a Sun Belt Conference player. What goes into that, and what do you see translating from the Tulane to Georgia Southern systems?
Yeah, well, he's a guy who I know what he can do, and he's very versatile. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be the feature running back this year behind J.D. King. That's why we've got him 4th team, but he's just a natural football player. He's a guy that can play running back, receiver, return kicks, return punts, play wildcat quarterback. And what I saw from him when he was at Tulane was just an explosive playmaker. And I think he's going to translate well into the offense. Talked to Coach Lunsford, going over the team with him post-spring this year. He feels he's going to have a huge year. So a lot of that went into putting him onto the all-conference team.
Dive into some of the non-conference opponents for Georgia Southern this year, and it starts with Game 2 and FAU. What do you see from this FAU team, a team that Georgia Southern saw last year here at Paulson Stadium after getting a little bit of a scheduling snafu, but what do you see from this FAU team this year?
Well, FAU is one of those teams where Coach Taggart was a first-year head coach last year, didn't have the benefit of spring practice, and frankly surprised me a little bit with how they came out. Florida Atlantic ended up starting out the season 5-1, and then got hit hard by COVID down the stretch. But I like what I saw out of their defense. Last year, their defense gave up just 342 yards per game. And then even in the Georgia Southern game, a game they lost 20-3, they held Georgia Southern just 339 total yards offense. They've got 10 starters back on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, they've got 10 starters back. And the biggest question mark is going to be quarterback, but they've got 2 guys coming in, a transfer from Miami and N'Kosi Perry, transfer from Penn State, Michael Johnson. Those are big-time pluses. They add in a transfer from South Florida, running back, and Johnny Ford, another dynamic running back, much like Amari Jones that we talked about. They add in from on the offensive line an Auburn transfer in Kamir Bell, a Florida State transfer in Andrew Baselli. So they did attack the transfer portal on the offensive side of the ball, where I think they will be improved. And defensively, they already had one of the best defenses in CUSA. So that's going to be a tough game for Georgia Southern. Plus, Florida Atlantic gained familiarity with the option last year, having faced it, and now they get that at home, second week of the season, so they actually get extra time in the fall to prepare for it.
The following week, Georgia Southern will head out to Fayetteville, and this is an Arkansas team that I know people out in Fayetteville are getting more and more excited for Razorback football and what they could be in 2021.
Yeah, and we talked about the depth of the Sun Belt division that Georgia Southern is playing in this year, the East. Well, they're taking on the SEC West, and while I picked Arkansas 7th in the West, this is another one of those divisions that's got 7 bowl caliber teams. And Sam Pittman just did a remarkable job last year with Arkansas. I mean, they were a team that hadn't won an SEC game in a couple of years. Came into the season with no spring practice. They only had 13 returning starters last year, and they were actually an underdog in all 10 games. But they went 3-7, and not only 3-7, pulling upsets of Mississippi State, Mississippi, Tennessee. You could argue they beat Auburn. There was a backward pass in that game that should have been ruled a fumble. Arkansas should have beaten Auburn, but the refs said it was an incomplete pass or intentional grounding and gave the ball back to Auburn. Auburn got a late second field goal to beat them. You look at the LSU game where they were depleted on the defensive line, yet only lost by 3. Missouri kicked a field goal on the final play of the game to beat them. They could easily have been a 6-4 team last year, despite being in the first year. Now they've got 19 returning starters coming back. Biggest question mark is quarterback. They lose their quarterback Felipe Franks, but they do return KJ Jefferson and Malik Hornsby. I like both those guys. They're solid. They've got one of the best wide receivers in the country in Treylon Burks, one of the best tight ends in the country in Hudson Henry, a top-notch offensive line. And defensively, they've got a linebacker in Grant Morgan and a safety in Jalen Catalon that are among the best players in the country. So this is a very dangerous Arkansas team, and that's going to be another big-time test for Georgia Southern. Who made the schedule for Georgia Southern, by the way?
I think that would be the athletic director, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But the final non-conference game that Georgia Southern will have is BYU. Again, that's a home game, second to last weekend of the regular season. The first time Georgia Southern is going to see BYU that really jumped on the national stage in the last year or so. What do you see from this BYU team?
Well, it was really interesting, Colin. Last year when I was talking to Coach Satake, and we finally get done with our hour and a half phone call and going over every player on the team, we both were in complete agreement that in his 5th year, it was by far the best team he had put on the field. And just as I was about ready to hang up, he goes, Phil, we don't play the schedule we used to play. And I thought about that, and he was absolutely right. And then it proved completely right during the season when BYU's schedule got crumpled up, thrown out the window. I believe 8 Power 5 teams off the schedule. Now they played a more manageable schedule and probably should have been unbeaten last year. They got that Coastal Carolina game scheduled 2 days in advance. Coastal Carolina runs a very tough option to prepare for, even if you had a month to prepare for it. They had to play it in 2 weeks, and their wide receiver got tackled at the 1-yard line at the end of the game, or they still would have beaten Coastal in an outstanding 11-1 season. Now, my initial reaction with BYU was that they're going to be nowhere near last year, a much tougher schedule. They lose 7 starters on the defensive side of the ball. They lose their quarterback, Zach Wilson, who's going to start for the Jets this year. You figure there's going to be a big step back. But going through the team with Coach Satake, he likes the defensive line. Even though they're young, they've got no returning starters up front. He says he's got complete confidence in them, feels they go 3 deep on the D-line. The linebackers are solid this year. And when you look at the backfield, Tyler Algier and Lapina Katoa are a couple of guys that NFL prospects at the running back position. They're going to be good, not quite as good as last year's team. And that's going to be a real interesting game when those two play. BYU gets the benefit of a bye the week before Georgia Southern, which always helps when you're playing an option team. But Georgia Southern hopefully will take advantage of that home field edge.
Going through these conversations like we have the last 3 years, it amazes me how you are able to recall specific plays from a game that you have seen, obviously, but being able to recall a play from a year ago or whatever. Where did that memory come from for you?
Well, it is a pure football memory, I'll tell you that much, Colin. I couldn't tell you anything about anything else that goes on. In fact, people think I'm clueless in other aspects of life, but I've just fully focused everything of my attention into college football, and that's where my strength is. Other than that, like I said, other parts, I don't even notice things if it's not football.
from the overall perspective, what does 2021 on the college football world kind of look like, and who are some of the standouts that you kind of keep your eye on this year?
Well, I tell you what, the overall college football, I can't tell you how excited I am, Colin, genuinely about this season. Last year, after not knowing if we're going to play, not knowing the schedules, having teams' games get canceled, no fans in the stands, and now this year we're back to normal. I got to think that we're going to probably have the best home field edges across the country because fans got deprived of going to the games last year. They're going to come back, be super loud, be excited to be there. I think we're going to have the best home field edges maybe ever in college football, 1 year after having almost no home field edges last year due to COVID. As far as some of the key players this year goes, I think when you take a look at the Heisman race, naturally I've got Spencer Rattler there right at the top. I think Oklahoma will have the number one offense in the country this year again, and like they normally do when Lincoln Riley has got a veteran quarterback to work with. They have my number one rated offensive line, number two set of receivers, number four set of running backs. They're going to be explosive. They also bring a defense this year. A couple other players. How about Sam Howell in North Carolina? I think he's going to he loses his top two running backs and his top two receivers. At the end of the year, you're going to have two new names at that receiver spot that put up the same type of stats that they did last year. I think Sam Howell's going to have a heck of a year. Matt Corral, quarterback at Ole Miss, going to put up big-time stats in that Lane Kiffin offense. And then three new names on the scene. DJ Uiagalelei of Clemson, Bryce Young of Alabama, C.J. Stroud of Ohio State. All will be starting quarterbacks for the first time for those three powerhouse teams. And at the end of the year, it wouldn't surprise me if those three players were all Heisman finalists or close to being a Heisman finalist. As far as the Sun Belt goes, you got to like the fact that Grayson McCall is back this year. I think he's an outstanding quarterback, runs that offense extremely well. As mentioned, I'm really looking forward to seeing Amari Jones come in this year for Georgia Southern. I think he's going to be a big-time impact player there. And also, you look at a guy like Jalen Tolbert of South Alabama. I like what I saw to him last season. I think he's going to have a big year at wide receiver. And then how about the Coastal Carolina combination? It's highly likely that Javon Hiley and Isaiah Likely will be an impact duo for Coastal this season again.
It's going to be a great 2021 season to be able to watch. Going to be great to have everybody back in the stands, as you mentioned. Phil, really appreciate the time and looking forward to 2021.
Yeah, it should be a fun year. And, Colin, I think you're going to have a fun year announcing the Georgia Southern games. Let's get those home wins and do something big this year.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks, Phil. Once again, Phil Steele from Phil Steele Publications, and big fan of Amari Jones, a big fan of Georgia Southern this year is old Phil.
He amazes me every year.
Oh, it's incredible, and we talked about it a little bit, just his recall, his memory, because you would think for somebody that is so much in the national spotlight for college football, he wouldn't remember. Now, you and I remember it because we were watching it, but
right.
When Coastal Carolina and BYU were playing, it came down to the last play where a BYU wide receiver was tackled at the 1 yard line. I remember it because you and I were watching it because it had an impact on what we do.
Yeah.
That game, in the grand scheme of things, probably doesn't have a whole lot of impact on what Phil Steele does, yet he still remembers that play, and I guarantee you he could see it.
I made it a point to really focus on his Twitter this offseason, and you see stuff because he does have a blog where he will report various numbers about returning production at certain positions, number of tackles that a team has back. But he makes it a point to not only go back and watch just about every game that gets played, because I think in his magazine he shows that his setup on game days, it's something to the effect of between, 12 and 24 different monitors, so he can get every game that's possibly available that he can watch at a given time. But he also goes back and watches every spring game he can find. He goes back and watches all media day coverage he can find. Yeah. If there's anything locally from a news outlet for somebody like in Arkansas, which makes sense for us this year because you're going to see the Razorbacks in roughly a month out in Fayetteville. But he goes back and does that for everybody.
Yeah.
For 130 FBS teams. He also does FCS coverage. He incorporated that a couple of years ago. So
he does NFL coverage.
So when he says football is it, and he doesn't know a whole lot outside of football, I get it. Because the way that he does it, it is an all-consuming thing, and it really doesn't stop.
It would be awesome, and I don't know that anybody's ever done this, to have somebody go out and do a story just following him on a football game day. I think that would be a lot of fun, just to sit there and watch.
I honestly don't know if he would okay it.
That's a good point, too.
Because I wonder if the mystique of it is, okay, if you buy his magazine, he shows you his setup, but if he just says, you know what, I need all of my focus doing this, I can't worry about, look, I want to be able to help tell the story a little bit more, newspaper, magazine, or television station, but if that's incorporated as part of that experience, it's going to take away from what he's trying to do with the magazine. If he misses one day of action, that could completely disrupt what he's going to try to do with that year's magazine. But maybe if he softens up a little bit, maybe some people have tried, maybe they're working on it as we speak, but for him to give us as much time as he does, and that's a half-hour interview.
Yeah.
And we've been lucky enough to get him for the last couple of years, give us some greater insight into Georgia Southern, greater insight so you guys can get a chance to hear what somebody on a national stage thinks about the Eagles. It's always fun to hear him because you know that the season is that close. We have our countdown, but when you hear him, when he's on with us, it's really close. It's almost here.
And how genuinely excited he is for the football season.
He loves him some Amari Jones now.
Oh, yeah, he does.
Now, granted, we do too, having been to most practices and seeing the number of roles that he has been utilized in and how he's going to be incorporated into the offense and special teams this year. There's good reason to be excited about him, but there's good reason to be excited about a lot of Eagles.
Yeah. We're going to dive into our position breakdowns in just a few minutes after we go through the news and notes and what's coming up this week in Georgia Southern Athletics. This week we're going to talk about the tight ends, the offensive linemen, and the defensive linemen. And so we will get to that in just a few moments. Yeah, we got to smush a bunch together.
Because we figure those three groups, you could probably play all three of those.
Yes.
In the way Georgia Southern does it.
Correct. But going through the past week in Georgia Southern Athletics, women's volleyball had a preseason All-Sunbelt pick. Maya Wilson was the lone Georgia Southern recipient for the All-Sunbelt team. Georgia Southern was picked third in the Eastern Division. They will start their season coming up this weekend as they will host the Bash in the Borough. It'll be a 5-team event. Georgia Southern will play Friday and then 2 on Saturday. It starts on Friday, 6:30, the first serve, inside Hanner Fieldhouse against Presbyterian. They will face Coppin State at 12:30 on Saturday afternoon, and then Saturday evening, 6:30, the final match against Bethune-Cookman coming up in Hanner. You will have 3 other games that get played as part of the Bash in the Borough tournament, 1 on Friday, and then it'll start 10 o'clock on Saturday, 4 o'clock on Saturday in between the 2 Georgia Southern matches.
One, that could be your pre-football Georgia Southern activity. Get a chance to see a lot of volleyball. Maybe, Chris, in your college viewing experience in 2021, we just had Walker Sandlin on not too long ago. Volleyball season tickets only $50. That's
and that's a team that you can really, and you can say this about all of Georgia Southern's teams, and I feel like we do, but that's a team that you can really get behind. The program that Chad Willis and his staff have built over there for Hanner Fieldhouse and being able to do what they do has been a lot of fun to watch grow over the last couple of years.
Year 3.
And it feels like he has been here for about 17 years.
It is only his 3rd year, but
that's crazy.
If it's somebody that is as active community-wise as he is, as much as that team is, they're always wishing the other teams good luck because we're all in it together. We want to focus on our primary sports, especially the ones that we cover. But when you can feel that some of your brethren are that behind you, it fosters what we have needed the whole time, whether we're in the middle of a pandemic or not.
Moving on to Georgia Southern men's golf, we took a couple of weeks off without talking about Carter Collins, and I feel like
We're sorry. I
feel like it's illegal. But men's golf put out their schedule for the 2021 season and 2022 season. They will have a couple of different events, 4 of those coming in the fall. They will start off September the 12th through the 13th. That's a Sunday and Monday up in Minnesota for the Gopher Invitational at the Winsong Farm Golf Club.
We may have flown over that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, we might have.
We weren't there long enough to go see it 2 years ago. We may have flown over it.
Then they will move on.
That trip. God, I'm sorry, that trip. God.
Then the following Monday and Tuesday, September 27th and 28th, they will be up in Sapphire Valley, North Carolina.
That's beautiful up
for
there.
the JT Poston Invitational hosted by Western Carolina. Then a trip that they will be making again that I know they really enjoyed the last couple of times they made it for the Fighting Irish Classic up in South Bend, hosted by Notre Dame, as of course, in the Warren Golf Course at the beginning of October.
I want to say they touched the Play Like a Champion sign,
so.
and they got to roam around Notre Dame Stadium.
Yep, they had the whole Rudy experience.
It's his birthday today, by the way.
Of course it is. And then October 10th through the 12th, in the Bank of Tennessee Collegiate up in Johnson City, hosted by East Tennessee State at the Blackthorn Golf Club. And then they will move into the usual part of the spring portion of the schedule. It'll start February 6th through the 7th, hosting the Thomas Sharkey Individual Collegiate over at the Georgia Southern University course. They will head to Gainesville, go to Bluffton, South Carolina. The Schenkel will be March 18th through the 20th over at Forest Heights, an event that you always want to have marked on your calendar. They'll head down to Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, Cary, North Carolina, and then the Sun Belt Conference Championship April 24th through the 27th back in El Dorado, Arkansas at Mystic Creek Golf Course.
You got some amazing images last year, the team winning the championship, of Ben Carr running across the course to catch up with Carter Collins, pretty much jumping on top of him after they know they had clinched the championship, and then going to the NCAA regionals in Tallahassee. It was so awesome, one, to win those two conference championships along with women's tennis in the span of about 10 days.
Yeah.
But that program has just been so consistently good. The fact that Carter is not a Statesboro guy, but a South Georgia guy from Claxton, the fact that he has recruited so well, we know how successful he has been in telling the story of not just the program that he has built, but of this place. We associate the tradition of Georgia Southern so much with Irk Russell, and rightfully so. But to know that golf has been able to combine the entire story and help build their own traditions, it's one that we continually talk about, and maybe it's one that if you tune into these, you don't think we're going to talk a whole lot about men's golf, but they've just been so successful. Stephen Fisk was an All-American just a couple of years ago. He was nearly the best golfer in the country just a couple of years ago. Male Sunbelt Athlete of the Year. Georgia Southern's had that 2 of the last 3 years, with Mason McWhorter getting it this past year. The more that we talk about men's golf, the more that we are continually amazed by how good Carter has done and how he is going to continue to build that program.
Couple of news notes coming out of Georgia Southern baseball in the last couple of days. One coming out just earlier on today.
Yeah, they've been busy over there.
Yeah, they have. But have a new director of baseball operations, Christian Bourne, coming over from James Madison. He was a pitcher for JMU. He was actually a pitcher for JMU when Aaron Soka, the baseball contact, was at JMU up in Virginia. But he spent a couple of years under Coach Eikenberry up at JMU, doing a little bit of the pitching development for the director of pitching development at JMU, his alma mater. But he is now the director of baseball operations down in Statesboro, and also the volunteer assistant, Jeff Cordy, coming over from South Alabama, and he's following the track of one of our favorites, Cody Wofford. He's already gotten the JT Crabtree stamp of approval. He said he's a good guy. And that's really all we need coming from South Alabama.
Yeah,
but
Woff didn't get the stamp. No, he did. He did.
He did.
He absolutely
did. He got it from somebody else, but that's a whole nother story that is not for a podcast.
No, so if you get a chance to see Christian or Jeff roaming around campus or in the community, welcome to Statesboro. It's a staff that has had some turnover, with Jason Richmond getting a chance to be a position coach for the first time, full-time, going to USC Aiken, Seth Lancaster joining the staff up at Longwood, and a couple of other moves that have been made. BJ Green, now the pitching coach at UAB. The success, I think, is going to continue, but it's going to be a different version of that, how AJ Battisto is going to mold the pitching staff, and having Jeff and Christian as part of this new staff, this new direction. We'll see if Georgia Southern can get over that hump.
And one thing that I really like about Court, and I know you know where I'm going with this.
Probably.
He played at Illinois. Was a really good catcher.
Very good
for
catcher.
Illinois. And that's been his focus in his coaching career.
Yeah.
Taking care of the catchers, teaching the art of catching, and you and I being both former catchers, I know that is something that we have talked about a lot.
Well, it's funny that we go down to watch batting practice. We've got 30, 40 guys that we could talk to. We always seem to gravitate to Matt Anderson and JP Tye somehow. We always end up going over to the guys with the gear sitting on the bucket. That's just what we know. That's what we've known.
But welcome to those two big additions to the baseball staff, and I think you're going to do really, really good things over the next couple of years in Statesboro. Georgia Southern men's soccer finished up the exhibition portion of their schedule with a 2-1 victory over North Georgia over at Eagle Field in Irk Park this past Thursday. They will open up the regular season this coming Thursday as they welcome in the Blue Hose from Presbyterian coming in Thursday, a 7 p.m. kickoff over at Eagle Field. And then they will get into a part of the schedule that is going to be a gauntlet.
Maction.
No, not quite Maction yet. Well, it's Maction, but not conference.
That's not what he's
Maction.
talking about, though.
But coming up on Sunday, they will head to Charlotte to take on the number 18 team in the land and the Charlotte 49ers. It's really nice when you look on the schedule and you can see what the ranking is, because then you know it makes our jobs a lot easier. But number 18 Charlotte on Sunday, and we'll recap that one on next week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. But then the following Friday, September the 3rd, they will head to number 4 North Carolina. So you've got back-to-back teams ranked in the top 25, both in the state of North Carolina, and those are both away for Georgia Southern men's soccer to start off the regular season.
Hopefully they have enough time in Chapel Hill where they can go to timeout and get a chicken biscuit.
Excuse me?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when we ever get a chance, if we get a chance to go back to Chapel Hill, we're going to go to timeout. We're going to get this. It's a piece of fried chicken on a buttered biscuit with cheddar cheese.
Yep, I'm in.
Yeah. It's been around for about 40 years. It's a landmark. The last time we would have been in Chapel Hill would have been 15 when Georgia Southern men's basketball played Duke, and we did our tour of the Triad that
We did
day.
a whole tour, me, you, and Bill Bryan.
But the only in Chapel Hill, we got a chance to go in the Dean Dome until we were nearly kicked out. We ran out before we got kicked out, and we went to Boston Stadium where the Tar Heels play baseball. But I think they were redoing the infield. So the pictures we got, the infield was real torn up, but beautiful setting with the surrounding trees, and that'd be pretty cool to get a chance to play a series or a midweek there down the line.
Georgia Southern women's soccer started the regular season this past weekend. Started on Thursday at College of Charleston in a game that even before it started was a little bit more daunting than you would like. A 2-hour lightning delay, but ended up in 2 overtimes, tying the College of Charleston Cougars 1-1. And then on Sunday, a couple of late goals at Davidson would put the Wildcats over Georgia Southern with a 2-1 loss at the hands of the Davidson Wildcats. They will look to get back on track for their home opener on Thursday. It'll be a doubleheader. 4 p.m. the kickoff against Jacksonville, that over at Eagle Field in Irk Park as well. And then Sunday, they will head to Charleston, South Carolina to take on Charleston Southern. That a 1 p.m. kickoff.
So you'll have a good bit of activity coming up this Thursday with Georgia Southern football practice across the way, the tailgate line, then back on Eagle Field, the start of that doubleheader.
Correct.
Okay.
It's starting to ramp up, and it's so much fun to talk about this, not just because you get to see Georgia Southern back in action, but how close to normal this feels. Being able to be out at the exhibitions last week for men's and women's soccer, it felt normal, which is weird that normal feels weird.
Yeah.
I don't know if that made any sense in that sentence. But
And there's some growing concern right now with the Delta variant and what it could do, and I hope we don't go backwards, but I just hope that whatever chances we have to reach out and get back to where we were, whether that means being a little bit responsible where if you're indoors to wear a mask. I know that's not been mandated on campus from the university system or things like that. You hope it doesn't go backwards, but if you're in a situation where you know there could be some difficulties or there could be a chance where transmission could happen, just safeguard yourself that way that we don't have to worry about that becoming an issue and we can see a packed Paulson Stadium. It sounds like we're going to get it for BYU with the indications we've gotten from their fans that we may literally have wall-to-wall, blue and white, by the time November gets here. We want it that way every day. We don't want to have to go backwards. We don't want to have to worry about the person sitting to the left, to the right, front, or behind. It feels like it's time to be able to do the things that we enjoy without constantly worrying about every step we take.
Yeah, no doubt. Definitely steps in the right direction have been taken, and it seems like they may have slowed to more baby steps the last couple of weeks, but still going in the right direction.
Yeah, you'd rather them. They might be slow going forward, but as long as they're not in the cement, that's what we need.
As we move into this week's position breakdown, we break down a couple of different positions this week.
We don't have a whole lot of room to get our pass sets.
No, we don't. No, I'm not going to do that anyway. Nobody needs to see that.
If I back up, I'm going to break this chair.
Yeah, it'll be all right. But this week we're going to dive into the tight ends, the offensive line, the defensive line for Georgia Southern football. And this week for the tight ends, we'll start there. And you've got some names that you've heard before in this tight end group, and some that kind of were thrust into action last year because of different injuries. The name Sean Pelkison really comes to mind whenever you think of somebody that you didn't necessarily think you were going to have to see him be able to do what he did last year, but was kind of thrust into the limelight later in the season especially. And then you've got the names that you've known from the last couple of years, Bo Johnson, DJ Butler, Chase Hancock, and you look at guys in this group, and a lot like we talked about with the quarterbacks, this may be one of the deeper tight end groups that we've had here at Georgia Southern.
And it was that way going into last year, but then COVID hit. Bo Johnson missed the first week of the season against Campbell. DJ Butler got considerable action, had 3 catches against Campbell, had his first career touchdown. Unfortunately, as Coach mentioned a few weeks back, DJ's out for the year because of an Achilles injury, so unfortunately his season is over for the second time in 3 years. But you get Bo Johnson back after a season-ending injury. You get Chase Hancock back after a season-ending injury. Now, Cam Brown did finish up his eligibility, but Pelkison gets back into that mix, and you also have a couple of guys who have gotten some pretty good experience during camp, and Evan Lester and Harrison Hamsley.
This is and you don't hear very much about the tight end group at Georgia Southern, but this is one that I don't want to say it's a make or break group, but it's a really important position, especially the way that the offense on option plays. The tight end, 9 times out of 10, is going to be your lead blocker.
Think back to 14 and 15 when Coach Ruse was calling plays in his first go-round, how important it was to have Cody Rediger, James Dean, and Jeff Ward. I mean, Jeff Ward wearing 96 at tight ends still kind of threw me for a loop a little bit, but how important they were in the scheme of that offense. Now, personnel groupings, it may look a little bit different in 2021, but you know they're going to have to be a factor, especially on short yardage, when you can expect to see at least 2 of them on the field at the same time. And the good thing is Bo looks normal. Chase Hancock looks normal. I'm still convinced that Sean Pelkison scored against Louisiana Tech last year. How that did not get reviewed, I have no idea. But you incorporate Hamsley and Lester in as well. Both have looked good in different stages in camp. You need depth in that position considering how important they are. And last year when you lost 2 of them, and you're already 1 down this year because of the injury to Butler.
Very similar to what you talk about with the offensive line for Georgia Southern. There were a lot of guys that had to step up in kind of unforeseen circumstances a year ago, but it gives guys different opportunities. Caleb Kelly, you and I talk about it all the time. It seems like he's been here for about 12 years. He's played everywhere on that offensive line.
There is a note about that.
Uh-oh.
There is a note about this. Okay. As of right now, Caleb Kelly is slated to be the number 1 right tackle.
Okay.
Which would complete his cycle on the offensive line. If he starts a game at right tackle this year, it is believed that he would be the first offensive lineman in Georgia Southern history to start a game at all 5 positions. Not play. There have been some that have played all 5, but to start a game at all 5. Now, I had to get some help from William Maxwell and Brett Moore to make sure about this one, because guys like Maxwell started at 4 positions. Blake D. Bartola started at 4 different positions. But
you had to go deep into the history banks.
Well, that's why I had to go to 2 of the best to ever do it, because all those guys still talk from the Jeff Monken era, and they were really helpful, and I do thank both of them. Brett's actually in the process of getting ready for basic training. He's going to be out of pocket for a little while. But to say that you've done something for the first time in the history of Georgia Southern football in a good way, that we love stuff like that. So all Caleb Kelly has to do is start a game at some point this year at right tackle, and right now he's in that number 1 share.
But a lot of similar names that you hear time and time again on this offensive line, Aaron Dowdell. And there's so many guys that Logan Langmeyer will take over. We saw him at center last year. Yeah. Being able to see a lot of the same names really starts to make you feel more comfortable with this offensive line.
It makes me think about 2019 where you had 3 season-ending injuries at various points of the first couple months of the season. Last year, you had 6 guys start. So it was a bastion of consistency up front from guys that you knew you were going to see.
Yeah.
And really, you could say, look, Drew Wilson, of course, finished up his eligibility. Well, he opted to. He could have came back this year. But you could say that you've got 5 starters back because Brian Miller and Caleb Kelly shared reps at left tackle.
Yeah.
They split them almost down the middle in terms of starts. So that's why technically Georgia Southern has 16 starters back, but you could find a way to manipulate that to say 18 with guys that were starting by the end of the year and guys that you thought were going to have a bigger impact didn't because of injury or because of other reasons, because of COVID, what have you. But especially up front to basically say that you've got 5 starters back from last year, new position coach with Jeep Wade, somebody that really taught Alex Atkins everything that he knew when he was the O-line coach for Coach Ruse back in 14 and 15. You don't like to see turnover, especially how well Coach Hudson was liked for those 3 years that he was in Statesboro, part of the 18 team that won 10 games, and how awesome that was and the transition that had been made and giving that position some stability. But the early indications are that Coach Wade has really fostered a tough mentality up front, and the guys that they have back, that's a good situation to be in.
Switching sides of the ball over to the defensive line, we'll start in the middle with that nose tackle position. You know C.J. Wright is going to be plugging that hole up the middle, and he has done a fantastic job, especially earlier in this preseason camp. Great to have him back. And then you look at a guy like Parker Devine, who's going to have to step up into that nose tackle spot in that number 2 more than likely with Gavin Adcock, as Coach Lunsford talked about in the last couple of weeks. Gavin going to miss the first couple of games because of an injury. But you've got a guy, Parker Devine, who has played a lot of different positions on that defensive line, but being able to fill up that number 2 hole.
It's been sparing action the first few seasons, but this one I think is where he could break out. I also think about how well Justin Ellis played down the stretch last year. Remember the South Alabama game that Thursday night last year where he had 2.5 tackles for loss and a sack and a half. So I think that he is somebody that's going to be counted on a lot more. Dylan Springer is somebody that's been here since 2018. Numbers were down a little bit last year, but now he's going to get a chance back in the starting lineup. And somebody I'm intrigued about is Brandon Wilson. Somebody that was there last year, Battery Creek, Beaufort, South Carolina. Somebody that was around last year, played just a handful of snaps. He's currently in the number 2 chair at defensive end, and we know how much Coach Cabral likes to shovel those guys in and out. And really, that's a thing that we've seen take hold at a lot of different places in this conference. With the evolution of up-tempo offenses, of course, you can't sub until they sub, but with as fast as teams are going, you want to make sure you've got fresh bodies and healthy bodies, especially on that defensive line.
And I think, and Phil Steele brought it up just a few moments ago in our conversation with him of who are you going to get to replace Raymond Johnson, and I don't know that you're going to have a Raymond Johnson type of player, but I think with the depth and being able to get the quote-unquote 2s in to replace the 1s when you need it to, it's not necessarily 1s and 2s. It's more 1A, 1B on that defensive line, it seems.
A.J. Watkins is somebody that has played really well in spurts. He had some injury troubles last year, missed the back half of the season due to an injury. He's been banged up a little bit in camp, but that's somebody that is going to be heavily involved once he returns. Trayvon Locke from Savannah and Benedictine, he's missed some time in camp as well, but that's someone that is immediately going to be in the rotation when they're back in full go. There's a lot of guys that can play, but you have to be a little bit nervous when somebody of the pedigree of Raymond Johnson isn't back, somebody that's now trying to earn a roster spot with the New York Giants. That doesn't mean the guys that are here can't do it to that level, but everybody's going to have to pick it up a little bit to make up for 14 tackles for loss.
I'm with you. Justin Ellis is the guy that really stands out on this defensive line for me in the jump that he's made from past years to this year. And I think he's kind of made that jump on the leadership side as well. He's one of the guys that in the preseason press conference that Coach Lunsford had for all the media just to kind of overview what preseason was going to look like for Georgia Southern, he was one of the guys that Coach Lunsford picked to come to that press conference. And I think that kind of speaks volumes up to the jump that he made. Yeah, you can bring in some guy that you think is going to speak well or whatever, but Coach Lunsford has always said, if you're a guy that I bring to especially a preseason press conference to overview the entire season, there's a lot of stock put into that.
We were standing right by the bridge at beautiful Eagle Creek before the first practice for that initiation run over the bridge. And the thing that struck us right away was how much different physically so many guys looked.
Yeah.
And you can chalk that up to having a normal off season and guys not having to cobble together their own plans because of COVID concerns. You got a chance to be in a program with Coach Greenhall, and watching Justin Ellis run by, That's the best shape I've ever seen him in.
Yeah.
I'd throw Randy Wade in there, but we're not talking about linebackers yet. But Justin Ellis is somebody that physically looks as good as I think he ever has. He's going to be slotted as one of those starters on the defensive line. He's going to be wearing number 2, and defensive linemen that wear single digits always look massive, so even more so considering the work that he has put in the weight room. But I think he could be an all-conference guy. I think he has that kind of ability. He's finally healthy, and if he's able to thrive like we think he can, I think he's going to be an all-conference guy.
Yeah, I do too. That'll wrap up our position breakdown of tight ends, offensive line, and defensive line. Next week, we're getting into...
we got linebackers and secondary.
Yes.
Could do specialists, too, since...
Beck.
You would like that.
Got it.
No, we would have one more show. We could give specialists...
we?
Yeah, we could give specialists their own... Or,
No. Next week's game week.
I guess that is true.
I mean, we could do the specialist after game 1.
Or we could have them have the specialists live. I think Beck would eat that up.
Oh, goodness.
I don't know if Coach would like us pulling them out of practice. But
Yeah, next week is game week. Wow.
I thought we had an extra. I messed up my days, but yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely have to do the linebackers and the back 7. Linebackers and secondary.
Back 7, and then we'll sprinkle in some specialists.
Back 8 in this case, but
same thing.
Or back 9, whichever.
Yeah. But that'll wrap up this week's position breakdown. Before we wrap up this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation, today is a big day for you. You're gonna be.
Oh yeah, I forgot it now.
You're gonna be heading out here in just a few minutes to Allen E. Paulson Stadium.
Yeah.
To, as Frank would say, have a little slumber.
Yeah, one bad slumber party.
Yeah.
I'm worried that somebody's going to mess with the lights or that somebody's going to try to shake the stadium.
Would do that. If you shake that stadium, I don't know. You might have some bigger issues.
Get an impromptu earthquake, or maybe Roger's going to back the truck up and try to pull up the turf, and that one's probably the most likely.
Yeah. Have you decided where your nesting location is?
No, the original plan is I'm going to do a Facebook Live at some point tonight just to give people a tour of the press box for some that may not have seen it before.
And this is on your
This will be on my personal Facebook page, but if the weather's good enough, I could make my way down to the 50-yard line.
Camping out under the stars?
I'm not going to nail any spikes into the eagle head. I think that'd be sacrilegious in a couple of different.
That'd go well.
I don't think that Derek and Ray and Jeremy would appreciate that. Roger really wouldn't appreciate that.
No, I think Roger'd be fine with it since it was the turf.
I still feel like if I make that pot commitment to go onto the field, that pop-up rainstorm is going to turn into a typhoon with my luck.
Yeah, I could see that. So you haven't nailed down your final location?
No, but I've got a couple different sleeping options. I got a little pop-up tent. I did bring a little pop-up tent just in case I need to.
Wait a minute.
A little pop-up tent.
Because in my mind, I picture like a Fisher-Price tent.
It's not as flimsy as that. Her and I
Does
went
it have any cartoons on it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because when I hear little pop-up tent, that's what I think of.
You know, when her and I went to the beach a couple summers ago, we got this to shield the sun off.
Gotcha.
So we'll have that.
So you have shelter.
I've got shelter. Got a pillar. Brought my computer.
You got a sleeping bag?
No.
Ooh. Got a couple blankets, I would assume.
Got some blankets. Make sure it's nice and comfy.
Because
there's water in the fridge, so we're taken care of there.
I don't know if
there's water in the fridge.
Okay.
I put one in there the other day.
Fantastic.
Just in case it would be.
I was about to say, hey.
Well, because I knew that Georgia Southern football doesn't practice on Mondays now with school starting. You get that one day off per week, so I figured we wouldn't be back up there until then.
That's a good point.
After the scrimmage on Saturday.
Very valid point.
Which only 60 plays worth on Saturday, and quarterbacks, of course, aren't live, but they were blowing the whistle earlier. A lot of the periods were thud, which means if there's any kind of contact, you stop it there. There's very few snaps that were full go, but Amari Jones was very good. Marquez Watson Trent, he's going to see a lot of time at inside linebacker this year. He had an interception during that day. The UNC transfer, Kadri Jackson, looked really good. And they're actually setting the depth chart as we speak of what they plan on going into Gardner-Webb with. They'll start prepping Gardner-Webb this week, and then with game week, then it's scouts, 1s and 2s, let's roll.
You'll have to let me know what practice looks like tomorrow, because Tuesday Talks with Jared Benko start tomorrow. 5 o'clock, it'll start over at Jared's office on Facebook Live. It's a town hall type Facebook Live. So any questions that you have for Jared Benko, you ask it, and he has to answer it. I guess he has to. I think that's up to, I guess tomorrow it's up to Aaron if he hands it to him or not. So, So any questions? Do you have a question you'd like to submit?
I'll wait till tomorrow at 5.
Yeah, perfect.
I'll wait till. But and we know we were. I was thinking that get a chance to do a couple of extra days at Paulson. We had $1,300 raised altogether, and for those that did donate, you all don't know how much I do appreciate that, especially for the Irk Russell Fund, which, as we talked about with Walker, directly benefits Georgia Southern Athletics and the athletic scholarships through the Athletic Foundation. The link is up still on my Twitter, GS Eagles Voice, and my Facebook pages. If you want to donate more, I'll add days to Paulson, not.
Oh, you're extending the deadline.
Well, I'll extend it, and I'll talk about this
Oh.
once I do the Facebook Live in a little bit. But if we can keep adding money, I'll see if I can recruit people. Maybe I can get Terry to wiggle out of his house, or maybe get Jared or Chris to stay up there, or up the ante, see who else wants to pony up, because as soon as we're done here, I'm going over to Paulson, and I'm going to
So is it another
figure this
1,000
out.
for Terry, or does Terry set his own threshold?
Well, Terry always sets his own threshold.
That's a good point.
But if we could find a way to get to 2,000, if we make it there, then no reason why we can't be creative. If we can get to 3,000, we'll see what happens. But the links are up on my Twitter and my Facebook. I'm going over there in a few minutes, and we'll see what kind of trouble we can get into with nobody else over there.
Have fun.
We'll see.
We'll,
I'm a little nervous, but
what are you nervous for? You've been there before.
not this late, and me not being the
probably this late.
well, okay, by the time that it gets to
That's
that
true.
time. But
You've never woken up at that stadium.
we do have cable in the booth, which is good.
True.
But I've never been the only one up there.
Oh, that's true. A little spooky. Now would be the time to start playing some jokes.
Chris Davis, I'm watching
Do you think he would be the one to do it?
Yes.
Yeah, you're probably
Absolutely,
right.
absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. But I am looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
We'll let you get over to your pop-up tent at Allen E. Paulson. We will figure out where you were going to be on Facebook Live a little bit later on your own personal Facebook. So Danny Reed on Facebook. Search him. You'll see the Facebook Live link pop up whenever he goes live, and he will take you on a tour of Allen E. Paulson all by his lonesome.
12 days to kickoff. And I'm going to go over to the stadium, make sure everything's still good over there.
That'll wrap up this week's edition of Inside Eagle Nation. Appreciate you tuning in. Make sure to catch everything on Inside Eagle Nation, both on all your podcast platforms, whether it's iTunes, Amazon Music coming up just in the last couple of weeks, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere you get podcasts, you can find Inside Eagle Nation. Also here on Facebook Live, you can see the replay, and then on the YouTube channel, Georgia Southern Sports Network. Find it, subscribe it, and you will get notifications whenever a new piece of content comes up from the Georgia Southern Sports Network. But until next week, for the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, this is Colin Lacy saying so long, everybody.
You've been listening to Inside Eagle Nation, powered by Learfield, the official podcast of Georgia Southern Athletics.